One day last year, I was out with a friend shopping at garage sales, trying to find furniture for his new apartment. The day was bright and sunny, ordinary for Florida. When we had found all the furniture he needed, people started to end their sales. We started driving home when he pulled over to the yard of an elderly couple who were still sitting by their table with things to be sold. There were mostly ceramic statues and old books, things you would expect from people that age. But one thing really caught my eye. On the table was a box of maybe 12 movies. I started digging through them, seeing mostly uninteresting titles starring Tom Hanks, my least favorite actor. I was about to walk back to the truck when I noticed that one of the tapes said, "Ah, Real Monsters, the final scare." My heart started racing with excitement, seeing as how I have never seen this episode, and the fact that I've assumed the show had completely disappeared. I asked the price of the tape, and the old man said he'd take it for 10 cents for it. He had no use for it since his grandkids are all grown and never watched the tape. At the time, I didn't notice his odd tone of voice. When my friend and I had returned to his new apartment, I insisted that we procrastinate on unloading the new furniture so we could watch the tape. He agreed and put the tape into the built-in VCR to his small television. The episode started with 10 seconds of static, then cut to the dump. In the place then normal dark colors of the beloved cartoon were almost painfully vivid hues, the most prominent of which was disturbing realistic blood red, splattered all over the trash can and soaking into the dirt, and the texture of which was carefully drawn than normal. The soft sound static continued in the background, while the camera slowly zoomed in towards the washing machine, which was now dented, scratched, and splattered with bits of brain matter. I cringed a bit at the appearance of the familiar dump that had been warped to look so horrific. When the inside of the Monster Academy, the seats were mostly empty, except for the spots where Krum, Lickitz, and Oblinia were sitting. Zimbo, the obnoxious monster in the episode, Licks, Ickies, and Red Zombo, was flying around in a clumsy circle around the malicious-looking, angry Grumble. Looking through, someone had stabbed him in his left wing. The Grumble looked up and looked at the trio with hyperrealistic eyes, and his lips twisted into a horrid grin. He held up a single finger, as to indicate that he was wanting the monsters around him to stop talking, which was quite unnecessary considering the fact that no one was making a sound. "Tonight," he hissed, "the four of you will team up and perform one final scare, a scare so horrifying that it will be your last. You must complete it soon, like our fallen brethren already have done." He then looked at the ceiling and paused for maybe 30 seconds. "Go now, now, now!" he screamed, causing Lickus to cringe. The first sign of movement was from the trio of monsters. Oblinia uttered something under her breath, sounding like Lamvitz Vigus Dus had Veneto. Kurum then nodded and added, "Lamentum de." Lickis then shakily whispered something. Zimbo laughed sarcastically. My friend, who was taken to Latin courses in school, whispered those phrases in English, making the hairs of the back of my neck stand up. The scene then cut to black for about a minute, and then slowly brightened to reveal four monsters hiding in the alley, the malice in their eyes. Oblinia picked up Krum, throwing him out of the alley, under a bus, and looked under the genuine look of shock on his face. Photorealistic blood splattered all over the front of the bus and the streets as I watched my favorite character die, his eyes rolling into the feet of the small child, who began to sob. The blood on the windshield caused the bus to swerve, hitting the young family and smashing them against the side of the large building as the remaining monsters remained hidden in the alley. Chuckling unnervingly, demonic manner, "Lickus, you next!" Oblinia screeched enthusiastically. The camera then zoomed into the face of the small red monster, who was shaking and utterly helplessly in fear. A single tear dropped from his eye as he hesitantly nodded. Lickus put on his normal scary face, but the context was all wrong, making the lovable monster unnerving beast too aware of his own fate. Lickus then walked slowly to the center of the group of people, watching the obese street mind intently. He creeped up behind a man, black and white stripes, climbing up his clothes in a flash, digging his small nails and claws through the back of the man's skull, tearing audibly through the bone and brain tissue until now his even redder hands emerged from the mime's eyes. The mime then fell backwards into lickus, and the monster's bones can be heard crunching under the weight of the mime as the photorealistic gore splattered on the crowd. The camera then cut back to Oblinia and Zimbo, whose laughter echoed throughout the small alleyway. "Shall we do the final orders together?" Zimbo asked. Oblinia nodded. The two walked over to a young boy who was frantically attempting to help an old woman cross the street. Away from this terrible scene, Oblinia grabbed onto Zimbo, and the obnoxious monster flew upwards, lifting them quickly across the street and in front of their targets. Zimbo swiftly flew down on the old woman's throat, leaving a grotesquely large lump as the sound of small wings beating against flesh could be heard from inside. The lump was as Zimbo jerked around uncontrollably. For a moment before the sound of Zimbo's wings silenced up the lump in the old woman's throat and stopped moving. The woman, now in blue face, fell to the ground. "Grandma! Grandma! No! 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 No!" The boy was screaming violently. He then began to smash his head into the pavement. His wounds gained worse and worse until the screen faded to black. The camera then cut back to the Monster Academy, where a blood-splattered Oblinia stood in front of the Grumble, who had an evil grin on his face. "Oblinia, how marvelous," he said, as the scare played on the screen. "You managed to kill all these humans and trick the others into sure death. This is the best scare I've seen in decades." The Grumble then stared at Oblinia for maybe a minute, his grin only growing wider and wider grotesque before saying the words, "Congratulations, valedictorian." That is when the episode ended, and my friend and I stared at each other in total shock. He was shaking violently, as if having a seizure. Before going still, I took the tape to Goodwill to the nearest in my house. Thinking back, it was a horrible idea. I would never wish this episode on anyone. If you are an unfortunately nostalgic person to find this tape, burn it. I wouldn't want you to suffer from these horrible nightmares that I've been having lately.